G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome everyone. Today I'm interviewing Per Sjofors who's the price whisperer from Sjöfors, based in Los Angeles, United States. Thanks for your time today, Per.
Yeah, hey Troy, it's a pleasure to be on the show.
Let's start with how we know each other. So we both use the Podmatch platform to find podcasts to go on as a guest, and we connected on there. It's a really good way to find guests.
It's a good way of finding hosts.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
Well, what we do is we do willingness to pay research. And from that willingness to pay research, we can predict sales volume, revenue, and profits at different prices with great accuracy. And if you're running a business, who wouldn't want that?
Yeah.
Because that means that you can set your prices in such a way you don't leave money on the table.
Yeah, I think particularly small business owners, they don't understand this area of business or do any testing or research. It's a really valuable part. And it's one of the few things I remember from university, that saying the phrase of price elasticity of demand. And I was just fascinated by that at different price points, the units sold will change. And there is obviously an optimal point on that graph or that line for your price to give you the maximum profit. And a lot of business owners don't even consider testing.
It's interesting that you remember elasticity of demand from business school. My advice is to forget that piece, right?
Right.
And use that piece of the brain for something more useful, because the straight line elasticity of demand is completely false.
Right.
And I'll tell you why. It assumes that all products or services are equal and 100% substitutable for each other. It further assumes that all buyers knows exactly as much about the product or services. It assumes that all buyers have the same access to funds. It assumes that all buyers are in exactly the same circumstance. And it assumes finally that we make rational decisions. And obviously none of that is true. So a real demand curve looks more like a jagged, what do you call it, normalization curve?
Yeah.
Right. So it starts very low, and you consider you have price on the x-axis, it starts very low with a low price and a low sales volume, and that is because the price itself sets an expectation of value, of quality.
Yeah.
And if you're pricing yourself too low, people believe that buyers believe that you're not going to be able to deliver to your promise. So the lower the price, the lower the sales. And I mean, we've all been there. We hold something in our hands and we say, I kind of want to buy this, but at this price, this can't be any good, right? So you eventually reach a point where you have a higher price point, where you have the maximum sales volume. And if you consider further higher prices, sales volume will go down, but profitability will go up to a certain point, where you have a lower sales volume and a higher profits,
Yeah. I assume you've read the book Influence by Robert Cialdini.
I have not, no.
That's a great book, consumer psychology, and he's got a lot of examples of what he calls compliance officers working on us in marketing, etc., and some real life examples from his own life. And my favorite in that book, I won't give it away, is when he's talking to his neighbor who's an ex-toy company executive. But in the book, there's another example he gives. I think this lady had a jewelry shop just around Rhode Island. She went away on holiday for a couple of weeks. There was a piece of jewelry right in the middle of the store in the glass cabinet that hadn't sold for a month. So she left a note for a team to half the price so she could move it on. And she got back 2 weeks later and noticed it had sold. And talking with the team member, they said, yeah, it sold the next day. We did what you said and we doubled the price. And she could not believe it. Yeah.
Well, there's in fact the the methodology that so the story here is that I ran companies, in Europe and here in the US, and we did experiments with pricing. And some of those experiments worked very well, and others were complete duds. And what I'd learned in business school, like these demand curves we just talked about, and the theories behind pricing, it was so theoretical and so academic that it didn't help us to understand why some of those experiments worked or not. So 15 years ago, I decided I was too old and too opinionated to be a hired gun. So I set up my own shop and developed a process that makes every pricing experiment a success. And that is using willingness to pay research online into a company's marketplace. But the interesting thing, as you talked about this author, is that we had hundreds of successful engagements until not until, but about 5.5 years ago. Actually 5 years ago, I got wind of an academic field I've never heard of called behavioral economics.
Yes, that's right.
And so it turns out that what we do in my company is the practical implementation of behavioral economics. And so we really lean on 3 Nobel Prize winners and a bunch of other people. And it turns out that I mentioned this to one of my guys here, and the latest guy who got a Nobel Prize in economics is somebody called Dick Thaler, or Richard Thaler. And I mentioned this to one of my guys here, and he said, "Oh, Dick Thaler, he's my old professor." Right. So it's very interesting if you read these people's research. They Kahneman is maybe one of the most important one, but his books are so difficult to read. Yeah. But it's all about decision making, and particularly purchase decision making.
Yeah. And so you started 15 years ago, started the company?
With this company, yes. Yeah.
And how old were you when you started?
When I started this company, I don't know. I'm 67 now, so I must have been 52.
Yes. I've had coffee today.
I got my first CEO job when I was 29.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And I established a company in Switzerland, and that was sort of a I apart from business school, I have an engineering background, and I worked as an engineer. And my boss, who ran the company that I worked for, wanted me to go into sales, and I said no for years, until eventually he said, I'll fund you. So we set up a company in Switzerland. I'll fund you, and you start running it, then you build it. And that was sort of challenging because I've never established a company before. I've never been a CEO before. I've never developed a European-wide business, and it was all in a country where I didn't know the language.
Yeah.
So it was a bit challenging.
Steep learning curve from age 29 then.
Very steep. But we were successful. I think I grew to about 6 million in 3.5-4 years, and then I was bought over by one of my main competitors. It was a Japanese company. So I took over their subsidiary in out of London, and I over 3 years I quadrupled sales, or revenues, I should say.
Yeah, great. Now, before we move on to the next question, you've got to tell me how you got the name The Price Whisperer.
Well, it's very simple. I'm part of many different network organizations, and one in particularly here in Los Angeles, where not only had I presented several times, and we were up to like 250 or so people in the audience, and I presented about how you should price and so forth, and I also helped a number of members in that organization. I mean, I remember one guy, for example, he has a phone system in the cloud, and they were so underpriced. We said, you can quadruple your prices. And we got that from that willingness to pay research. And yeah, well, he quadrupled his prices. And he said two things happened. First, sales volume we went up with 25%,
Wow.
supporting what you just mentioned about that that jewelry. The other thing he said, and I'm using the technical, very technical term he used, he said, and we got rid of the bottom feeders.
Yep. Yeah.
So now he said we have a more professional level of customers. So our tech support costs have gone down with 80%.
Wow. Yeah. That's fantastic.
So I helped a bunch of companies there, and so they started to call me the price whisperer. It's nothing else because they couldn't pronounce my name.
Yeah. Do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of this business over the 15?
It's been actually going a little up and down for a variety of reasons. We're about 2.5 million, so it's very small. It's a boutique business. There's not many people want to engage somebody to look at pricing every day, but it gives me the opportunity to, which I really like, to really be the thought leader, to be out there and evangelizing on what we do.
Yeah, great.
But I have to say, having said that, it's the smallest business I run.
Yeah. Yep.
So but again, we're only 5 people, so
yeah,
margins are pretty good.
Yeah. And was it just you that started out on your own?
I started out, and then I invited a partner in the business, and he was then responsible for marketing and sales, and together we grew the thing also to about 2.5 million. And then one day he stopped being able to sell.
Why was that, out of interest?
I don't know. I couldn't figure it out, and because he was a partner, I just couldn't fire him. I eventually had to buy him out, but it was very painful. So
yeah.
So we went from like 2.5 million in revenue to like 300,000.
Wow.
In a year.
Gee.
Yeah, it was crazy. I bought him out, and then I had to start to build on my own instead.
Yeah.
So, and I can sell, but I'm not a sales guy.
Yeah.
I don't have that, that discipline to contact people on a regular basis and call people and just asking, what are you, how's life,
Yeah.
But we're back into 2.5 million again, so.
That's great. When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
In this business or in other businesses?
Oh, anywhere across your journey.
Well, I came here to the US to establish and run a division in a fairly large public company, and I felt really that I had succeeded when I took the largest order the company ever taken, which was a $32 million deal. And that was in '94, so $32 million were real money.
Yeah.
And I got back to the company, and the CEO looked at me straight in the eye, and he said, "Did you have authority to sign this deal?" To which I said, "No." Good, he said. Because you take the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. And so apart from that, we did more business, but I took that division up to 72 million in 2 years.
Yeah, fantastic. What does success look like to you?
I think I'm getting close to that success, which is not a monetary success. It's and maybe this sounds selfish, but I really enjoy to be seen as the thought leader I think I am. I have a best-selling book out also called The Price Whisperer, and to hear people, I mean, I had a call a couple of hours ago with a CEO of a company who just sucked up everything I said.
Yep.
you know. And I really love to help companies when I can, you know. I'm part of an organization here called Project Echo, and we do business plan competition for high school kids.
Great.
So, you know, we have these kids that are 15, 16, 17 years old, and we teach them all the business basics, and they have to go out and create a fictitious company and a fictitious product in some cases, and develop their go-to-market strategy and do a pitch as would they pitch to an investor.
I would love that in high school.
Yeah, and the girl who won last year, actually, I said fictitious company, she was already in business. She had developed an app, and she was selling it, and you know, it was not a fictitious business, and she was 16, 15. Wow. Maybe. You know, and that's just so rewarding, you know.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of fun. On pricing, have you done much with SaaS companies, online tech software? Yeah,
absolutely. For people say that pricing is some kind of art, or even black art sometimes, or and it's not. It's about process, right? So what we do in my company, again, is it's the process. You feed any company into the process, and out comes a company that typically doubles sales growth, typically earn 25 to 40% higher margins.
Wow.
And typically for that reason, more than double in shareholder value.
Yep. Yeah.
And I mean, just, you know, we've done maybe a dozen companies in Australia, you know, in all different industries, in travel, in home appliances, in consumer goods, and in SaaS services, and yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask out of interest, because I've noticed a lot of SaaS companies have doubled, even tripled some of their pricing in the last 6 months. I chair the second largest craft brewery here in Tasmania, and our brewing software, I could not believe it when our internal accountant said they've just tripled their price. And so we went off looking for alternative, and it looked like the competitors had also raised their prices as well. I mean, is that something you've seen in the last year or so? SaaS companies really?
No, not here so much, actually. We've seen price increases, but I don't follow prices of companies. It's not more than any other consumer, if you like, you know.
Yeah.
So but it's also so that the vast majority of companies are underpriced.
Yeah, totally agree.
And you probably have similar experience to me, that you talk to CEOs and they say, if I raise the price with just 1%, I will lose all my business.
Yeah.
No, that's not the way it works.
No, that's right. Yeah, I remember late 99 when I quit PricewaterhouseCoopers and started two tech companies. One was a web design development company. Now, I remember our accountant saying to us a year or so, "You got to raise your prices. You know, you're not making enough money." We said, "No, we can't. We can't do that. We're going to lose customers." And he turned around and said, "Yes, you are going to lose customers. The wrong ones, the dickheads."
Exactly. Yes. Exactly. And because the price selects your customers. You talked about this jewelry thing, for example. When I started the company, there was a Swiss watchmaker whose name I don't remember, that had made a series of watches from recovered Titanic steel.
Wow.
From the actual ship, right? Yeah. And they were selling them at 375,000.
Jeez.
And they ran out in a week.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't know how big the series was. Maybe it was only 2, maybe it was 50, you know? Yep. But if they ran out that quickly, they were underpricing themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and that is something. I mean, since we're on that topic, let's talk about two sort of stories here that is important for the audience, I think. The first is to understand what business you're in, right? Which many companies don't, surprisingly enough. And this was an interview I read with the CEO of Rolex, right? And journalist asked him to make a statement of the Swiss watch industry, to which the answer was, "I don't know. We are not in the watch industry."
Great answer.
You know, because I mean that's true. I mean they're in lifestyle, they're in luxury, all different things, but they're not necessarily in the watch industry, right? The other is something that again that you learn in behavioral economics, and that is price imaging, sometimes called price anchoring.
Yeah,
and what it means is that as humans, if we see multiple numbers, we cannot not compare them, right? It's just happened in a blink of an eye.
yeah.
And price imaging is used to make what you want to sell look more affordable. So you present your customer with a high price of something that they're unlikely to buy. And then you present them with the price of what you really want to sell. And you talked about SaaS companies that typically if they have prices on their website, it goes good, better, best.
Yeah.
Right. It should be the other way around. It should start with the best, the better, and the good.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I'll tell you this: I did this advice for a trade show here in and they had different levels of what do you call it, admissions, and they made another 100,000 in a week, right? But the story is that when Apple came out with the watch, the product they wanted to sell was $349, but they had the exact same product, same electronics, for $17,000, right? The only difference was the casing was gold, right? Yeah. And what happened was that all the journalists that wrote about this product launch, they wrote about the audacity of the company to come out with a $17,000 version of the same watch with the same electronics as the $349. And of course, those who were interested in the Apple Watch, they read reviews after reviews after reviews, and every time that 17,000 made the 349 more and more and more affordable. Right.
Perfect question for you. Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast-growing business?
To marketing, well, it's raise prices. If it doesn't work, drop them down again.
Yep.
Right. You can. It's a lot harder to increase price than it is to drop the price.
Yeah.
And a fast-growing business, another client of mine, a month ago or something like that, he sent me a screenshot of his accounting system. And he said that sales volume was down with like 5% or thereabouts, margin was up with 49%. And his message was more money, less work. Thank you very much.
Yep. That's great.
So it's and here's something else that you may want to look at, and the audience as well. If any company's profitability comes from only three variables: it's the total cost, it's the sales volume or whatever you sell, and it's the price.
Yep.
And of these, price have the highest leverage on profit.
Yep.
And I do something that I call the 1% challenge. And what I'm saying is that imagine you changing one of these three 1%. What is the result?
Yep.
So if you can increase your sales volume with 1%, for the average company, profitability goes up with 3.5%.
Mm-hmm.
If you can reduce your cost with 1%, profitability for the average company goes up with 5.5%. If you can increase your price or reducing your discounting, which is the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Profitability for the average company goes up with 11.3%.
That's huge. Wow.
Now, the challenge here, because this is the 1% challenge, the challenge is, have you ever failed to change anything 1%?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
So when you start having this, and I first of all, on our website, you can find the website by just Googling the Price Whisper. That's the easiest way. But on the website, we have one of those calculators. So
Yep.
for a small company, you just put in your cost, you put in your revenues, and then you put in the percentage change you want in your price, and it will calculate how much your profit is going up.
Yeah, great. We'll definitely link through to that in the show notes.
Sure. And it's amazing. No, what I wanted to say is that if you run a company and everybody within the certain management team and in management position knows about this very simple calculation, a lot is going to change in the company. Suddenly the salespeople can't give away 15% anymore. They have to give away 10% maximum, right? Suddenly the company starts saying, oh, couldn't we unbundle this service instead of giving it away? Couldn't we, out of this 15 features that we can add to our product, which 3 adds value enough so we can increase our prices? You know, a lot of small decisions is going to change. And we went through this process with a company called Sounds Unlimited. They're the market leader here when it comes to electronics for home theaters and stuff like that. And they put pricing as a centerpiece in their business strategy. The end result, over a period of 5-6 years, they grew from about 100 million to way over 1 billion.
Holy shit. Wow.
Yeah. And the you know, the CEO said, thank you very much, Per.
I hope you took some equity in it at the start.
No, I didn't. I didn't. But what I'm trying to say, that there is, in businesses in general, there is a tremendous cost consciousness. People think about cost all the time.
Yeah.
You talked about cost with these SaaS accounting software, you know, and you know, I don't know the actual numbers, but for you, switching to somebody else has a switching cost.
Yes.
Very, very few people think about that, right? But for your own business and for the audience own business, there's a tremendous amount of thought and effort and software and resources and worries that goes into the cost. And then pricing is something you set on you know, between 2 drinks at a pub.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
You know, and the pricing then, or you do something like just looking at cost and then say, in our business, we take our cost and we double it because that's the rule of thumb.
Yeah, markup.
Let me tell you a story about that. We did some work for a company selling supplements, and this is expensive supplements. So they said, we have learned in our industry that we should take our cost times 5. That is going to be the price, right? So, but the cost for a month of this supplement, our cost as the manufacturer is $35. So 35 times 5 is 145, eh? Right? Yeah. But at the same time, they said, but we know that nobody's willing to pay more than $100 for this. So they had this problem. We are going to have 5 times our cost, but nobody's willing to pay more than this, right? By gut feel. So we did the research, the willingness to pay research. We found that for this company's particular differentiators, for the particular value that they bring, people were willing to pay $200 a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were about to degrade their excellent product so that they could get to a price that was so low that they could do 5 times the cost. Completely unnecessary.
Well, yeah, and that's just going with your own personal biases or assumptions. You haven't actually tested it. There's no empirical evidence. You've just
exactly
had a thought, and that's very dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
How did you fund your business?
Oh, I out of my own pocket.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's a consulting business, so it didn't cost very much. I think I put down altogether like 380,000 or something like that. So
yeah,
and that was mostly to for marketing and hire some of the early employees.
Mm-hmm. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
That's a hard question to ask, actually, or to answer to. Because I just like I said, what I really think is success or personal success is that to be that thought leader, to be the ones that comes comes up as somebody that brings something new to society, brings something new to the business world, and so forth. From a financial point of view, I would not, but from the thought leader point of view, absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a real passion for what you do.
Yeah, if you don't have passion, why do it?
Yeah. What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
In my business, what I need to improve more?
Yeah.
Currently I'm spending a lot of money on marketing.
Yeah.
And I should have started to spend more money on marketing much earlier.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, we all know the mistake of if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
No, they won't. You know, and I've been able to grow this business by referrals.
Yep.
You know, and in fact, we're getting, I would say, most of our referrals from private equity groups, or rather the portfolio companies to private equity groups, because it's they buy underperforming companies, and the quickest way to make them perform is to fix pricing.
That's it. Very smart.
So you like one company, I don't think I mentioned this, but one PE-backed company we worked with a couple of months ago, we took them from 200 to 250 million in revenue in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Another one, also PE-backed, different PE firm, we took from 15 to 35 in 6 weeks.
Jeez, my God.
Yeah. Yeah. This is because they were so underpriced.
Yeah.
And for a private equity group, this means that the hold time that they typically plan for 3 to 5 years can be reduced to 1 year.
Yeah. What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
80-hour work weeks. I had vacation 2003.
Mm-hmm. That tells you
something. That was the last one.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
Oh, the doing it myself.
Yeah.
I mentioned that I started this because I was too opinionated and so forth, and I had this very interesting conversation with the last company I was actually employed in. I've never been fired in my whole life, but I had the conversation with the chairman of that particular company, and I resigned, and he fired me at the same conversation. I said to him, this is not working out. No, this is not working out, he says. So I better leave. I said, well, yeah, I sort of had that in mind, he said.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Mindset is maybe that it just got to be done. If you don't do it, if it's not done by you, it's got to be done by somebody else, but it's got to be done. You can't leave things for, and just hope they do themselves, they don't. And that is really maybe the most important thing and that means sometimes you have to do boring shit,
Yeah. The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
I mean, I think as a small business owner, you have to be passionate for what you do.
Yeah.
If you don't have passion for what you do, you're not going to succeed. Because, and this is something I advise when I speak to startups and, and looking at their business plans and stuff like that. I tell them it's going to cost twice as much and it's going to take twice as long. And because it always does. And if you're not up to that, if you don't have passion, you're not going to stick around for it.
I heard the rule of 4x2 when I was living in London. A VC was speaking about, he gets hit up a lot for money, obviously pitched by startups, etc. And he always rolls out the rule of 4x2, which is it's either going to cost 4 times as much and take twice as long, or cost twice as much and take 4 times as long. The difference is you get to choose which path.
Yeah. Well, now when you mention it, I've heard that before. Yes.
Yeah.
Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success, then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com.
Perfect question again for you, because from your big business experience as well as your own business, can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
When it comes to people, always try to hire the smart people that are smarter than you.
Yep.
And the second, and I cringe when I see this. Sometimes I see the folks that comes out with this requirements document that is like 2 pages long.
Yeah.
Right. And finding somebody that fits all those requirements are almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, if you hire good people, good, honest, smart people, they'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
And not only do they figure it out, they're going to be substantially more productive and you may hire somebody for one role and he or she finds out that there's a better role and move into that role, whether you like it or not. And again, you hire the right people, it sorts itself out. And whatever you do as a manager, do not micromanage.
No.
And I'll tell you, it was so funny when I was part of another in-person networking group when the pandemic hit, and we all started our networking sessions via Zoom. And seeing the frustration in some of those CEOs because now they could not longer micromanage.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know what's going on. I can't stick my head out into somebody's office and just see what's going on. It's crazy.
It's just such a false mentality that if I can't see you, you're not working, and just destroys trust.
Yep.
The team member just isn't as motivated unless you do build that trust into your professional relationship with them. It's
that's right. And there is a I mean, we kind of all know this, but I think it's worthwhile to repeat, and that is that time lost not making a decision is lost forever. Whereas a mistake can almost always be repaired, if you like.
Yeah.
You know? So not making decisions is one of the most, and this is what happened when you have, I had lunch actually with an old colleague of mine. He worked in one of the major computer companies. He ran one of their divisions, and he said that it said this earlier that his workday from 8 to 6 every day was booked in 15-minute meetings to make decisions, because the company was so fear-driven that nobody except him as the division head dared to make a decision. Wow. That was not because of him, it was because the CEO that he reported to.
Yeah.
Well,
excuse me. What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
It's sort of the same thing. Make sure that you have the right people, that you give them leeway to make mistakes, that you let them leeway to make decisions, to take responsibility, and so forth, and also that they are all aligned with the goals. And what you want to do is that you want to set the goals for the business, what the business should achieve. You let the team figure out how to get there, right? So then it's a bottoms up kind of organization, and everybody has buy-in and so forth. And if there are people that doesn't fit that, they need to be excused very quickly, because they become bad apples and can have a tremendously bad influence on the business.
Yeah,
to use the term, you need to have the right people on the bus.
Yes, exactly.
And the wrong people you kick off.
That's right. Jim Collins, Good to Great.
Correct. Yeah.
That was in the second book, Good to Great. Built to Last, I love. I assume you've read that one as well, his first one.
I have, yeah. Unfortunately, almost all the companies that he talks about in Built to Last is not longer here.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well,
except Nordstrom's.
Yeah, Disney, Sony, and Boeing are still there. They're the ones I can recall anyway. Yeah, I was just pulling out the quote because that's one of my favorite quotes. The shorter one is people aren't your most important asset. The right people are. Get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off, and the right people in the right seats. But from that book, the longer quote goes, just to your point a minute ago, get the team on and then find out where to go. In that book, he says, first who, then what. We expected that good to great leaders would begin by setting a new vision and strategy. We found instead that they first got the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats. And then they figured out where to drive it. The old adage, people are your most important asset, turns out to be wrong. People are not your most important asset. The right people are.
Yeah. Well, there's another, since we talk about books, there's another very interesting book called Measure What Matters.
Yes.
By John Doerr.
Mm-hmm.
And John Doerr is a famed venture capitalist. And what he does in this book, he talks about OKR, objectives and key results.
Yeah, but I think that came out of Google, OKRs to Google.
No,
right.
Actually, it came out of Andy Grove at Intel.
Okay, Intel. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, and actually one of my advisors is even older than me. He was one of the first employees at Intel and learned business from Andy Grove.
Right, wow.
And a little later, he ended up mentoring Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And but that's a very good book, and because what OKRs do is that they put, and there's OKRs is just one way of doing it. There's other ways too.
Yeah.
But it makes sure, just what you said, that once you have the right people on the bus, they eventually set the direction, right? and it's a framework for how that is done. The difficulty with all of these, including OKRs, is really objectives and key result is really to find out what are the objectives.
Yeah.
What are you going to measure, right? So,
tell our audience how you've handled balance.
How I handle what balance?
Balancing work with the rest of your life, I guess.
Well, once you have your own company, it's just life. There's no difference in whether I'm sitting here in my office and talking and do work, and or whether I'm walking my dogs, out in the park or something like that. And it's just different aspects of life. It was different when I was employed. Then there was work and life.
Yeah.
Now it's just a mesh, and it I don't know if that's the right way of handling, but that's what I do.
And how much professional development have you invested in yourself over the years?
Nothing. Never. Unless you want to put reading business books in this, I've never done any. I've never had I have Ben, like I said, but he's an advisor. He's not a coach.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Have you had mentors?
No.
Right. Do you have a board of directors or advisors in this business?
I have Ben as an advisor. No, but I don't have a board. We're too small for that.
And
I am on boards, on the other hand.
Right. Yeah. And you've had a business partner that exited. Any final advice for the audience who may need to?
Yeah, actually, I this has happened twice. But the one thing that is absolutely crucial is to have a buy-sell agreement.
Yeah, shareholders agreement.
And well, it's actually specifically buy-sell.
Right.
And what that means is that it's an agreement that stipulates under which conditions one owner can buy out other owners, right? Yeah. And most important in this is that it has to have a formula for the valuation of the shares.
Yep. Yep.
Because if you don't have that, this is going to end up in a tremendous pissing match.
Yes.
Right?
And a lot of legal fees.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in my case, we had that in place, and so I said to him that, well, sales tanked. You haven't sold anything for a year almost, and I'm going to buy you out, and this is how much I'm going to pay for. This is what we have in the contract.
Yep. Great.
And that was it.
Would have saved a lot of heartache and time.
Yeah. And I had another joint venture that I left about 2.5 years ago, where I found that my business partner, but somebody I trusted and liked, was tremendously lazy. And I mean, you don't, when you start a business and suddenly there's COVID, you don't sit at home staring at the wall for 3-4 months,
No.
And just complaining that nobody's buying anything. You work harder, right?
Yep.
And that's what I heard from all the other CEOs I know. They just work harder. And he didn't do anything, and he also made a tremendous amount of wrong decisions, So I actually still own almost half the company, but I have no interest in being active in it. So
yeah. All right, Per, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
I think the hardest thing is to believe in yourself, because it's going to be a lot harder than you think it is when you start.
Yeah. Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
Crossing the Chasm.
Oh, that's a great book. Early 90s, I think, focused mainly on the tech industry, but that is a great book.
It's a great book. But it really helped me. There is a later edition from maybe 10 years ago.
Jeffrey Moore's the author. Yeah,
exactly. But the first edition is better.
Yep.
And the first edition is because he used examples in the first editions of companies that I'm familiar with because I'm an old fart, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was reading that book. I must have read the first edition because I was reading that book, and a lot of those companies were, either disappeared because it was written in the late 80s, early 90s, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, most of them have been. The other great business book is The Innovator's Dilemma.
Yes, I've heard that's good.
Yeah, the author is somebody called Christensen. Right. And unfortunately, he died a few years back. But it's all about how in the tech industry, the survivability of a company to the next generation tech in whatever business you're in is almost zero.
Yeah.
And he's using the disk drive industry as an example, how no company survived going from these big drum discs things they had in the 50s to smaller next generation. No, not a single company survived, right? And how you went from these floppy disks that was 8-inch to 5 to now. The takeaway here is that what these companies did, who died, they were listening to the customers.
Yeah.
They were not listening to the market. So if you think about, you had these mainframes with these big, you talked about washing machine, these disk drives looked like stuff you put in a washing machine,
Yeah.
And they were the same size. And they were sold to the people using mainframes. So the disk drive manufacturers talked to the mainframe customers, and they said, we have this new generation of smaller disk drives. Are you interested? And the mainframe guys said no, right? But then when mini computers replaced mainframes, the guy with the big stacks died.
Yeah.
And new disk manufacturers survived when mini computers started to anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Buy it and read it.
Yeah, that's on my list. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
No, I unfortunately I read, I don't listen.
Yeah. One tool you would recommend to help grow a small business?
I mentioned this, and I think this is really key to whether it's a small or a big business. It is to get that mindset that profit trumps everything. If you have that throughout your entire organization, that profit trumps everything, it's going to make a huge difference for the company. Because many small decisions are going to be different.
Yeah.
And how do you teach people that? I mean, it's not rocket science, right? But like everything in a company, it comes from the top, right? So it has to be that if the owner, the CEO, the board thinks about profit first.
Yeah.
Right. And considering what I just said, that profit is most affected by pricing, not by cost, not by sales. It changed everything. I mean, it doesn't make sense for somebody to, let's say, hire a consultant for 2 months to go through to save 3% on cost when you can get the same effect just by adding 2% price.
Yeah.
And it took you all of 5 minutes.
Yeah. Final and my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
I would tell myself, this is going to be really fun.
Great. Thanks very much for your time today, Per. I really enjoyed it. I think the audience got a lot of value out of it. Congratulations on your growth over the last 15 years, starting out on your own to 5 people now and 2.5 million top line. It's really impressive. Well done.
Thank you. Well, it's been at the bottom, so I've done it twice. Thank you, Troy, for the show.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.